everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And today we're talking about the brand new movie from Pixar, finally back in theaters as well, which is fun to see, although not making as much money as they hoped, it looks like. But we're talking about Elemental, the new movie from the studio that brought us Inside Out and Toy Story series and all other kinds of great stuff. So Dylan, would you like to tell the people what Elemental is about?
Yes, well, befitting this movie that had a very little fanfare and kind of just like came out of nowhere, it feels like. The description is Elemental follows Ember and Wade in a city where fire, water, land, and air residents live together. So, very generic.
Yes.
Yeah,
just seeing the trailers leading up to its release, a lot of people are just kind of people I'd bring it up with are like, oh, isn't that their new movie that's kind of like Inside Out?
Yep.
You know, it's got that sort of like kind of adjacent concept vibe. It's got some Zootopia vibes as well with kind of how it tackles prejudice and kind of this big city that exists that's different from our world with kind of all its own unique rules and in this case elements. The story's interesting in kind of how it starts, where the fire people are the characters in the movie are immigrants.
Yeah, it's an immigrant story, which
yeah, and the fire people aren't liked by the rest of the Element City community. The other three elements live fairly harmoniously, it seems, and the fire people are relegated to living kind of in their own corner of the city, sort of tucked under the bridge and above the canals, and just kind of in this little sort of dirty pocket that nobody else really wants to go to anyway. So they just kind of say, like, here, you guys can live here.
Yep.
And opens with our character Ember, one of the main characters, her parents arriving and kind of starting their own shop and sort of building it from there, and then sort of cut to when she's older and kind of at the point where she might be taking over, and that's kind of where the story begins.
We see the first generation come over. Her dad kind of comes over and, you know, starts this community almost. There weren't like barely any fire people, and then, you know, she is now second generation, and it deals with the pressures of that, you know, do you carry on like the legacy of the first generation because they sacrifice so much, and so, you know, whatever their dream is, you should work for that and honor that? Or if you don't want to do that, is it okay to say, I don't want to do that, I want to do my own thing, you know, and what kind of rift that might cause in the family?
Yeah, I think that's the most effective part of the movie is the way that that's handled. I don't think there was anything profound about the way they told this story. I think it's kind of treading pretty familiar ground, but it's executed pretty well in an easily digestible and understandable way for kids. So I do think that part of it works. That's kind of the only part for me that works. We were kind of talking just before we started recording this episode that it sounds like you had a far better time with Elemental than I did.
I did have a better time. I mean, I think, you know, I saw it with one of the leading Pixar experts in the area, and you know, we were both having a great time. And maybe, you know, maybe it's one of those movies there, you know, it depends on who you're with, and just, I don't know, or maybe I was just in a good mood. But I thought that the comedy, how we had mentioned that the comedy in Pixar had fallen off, I felt like the comedy was a little better than the recent Pixar movies. I also felt like, even though it was kind of, the whole thing is kind of a concept, like you said, kind of like Inside Out or even Soul, where it's not, you know, it's not a story happening in real life that you know, it's instead like, it's very high concept. The people are elements, and so they get a lot of mileage out of that. And I thought that was pretty well done. I agree. It was like not necessarily deep. They didn't really, you know, it was kind of a predictable story, but overall, I just felt like what they were doing just I don't know, was fresh and just like different while still kind of having that Pixar feel. And I don't know, I walked out of there thinking it was definitely like better than like Luca or Onward or like some of the other recent ones. That's how I felt initially. I will say that in the days since, I've maybe gone down just a little bit, just because looking back, there aren't too many big moments that really stick with me. And I did get a chance this weekend to rewatch Up, which is kind of a earlier example. And although that movie can be polarizing, the emotional punches in that movie still hit, and they're set up so well that even the ones at the end, Carl just like pinning the badge on him, little things have so much weight because they've set that up. And this one did feel a little bit like, no, we're just going to stay in the shallow end and we're kind of going to go fast. Like the movie felt pretty quick to me. So in the moment, I felt like it was better, and I was like, okay, they're getting back in the right direction. And it was definitely a different story. It was weird how they didn't promote it more, but like I really enjoyed myself. And then just in the days since, I just have felt a little bit like it's gone down, just because they did kind of stay in the shallow end of the pool.
Sure. I think maybe too, you saw it with a date, and it is a romantic comedy
That
in
didn't
many
hurt.
ways as well. So I feel like that can't hurt. I think
No.
that'd probably help a little bit. So yeah, I did not like this more than Luca or Onward, and I don't think those movies are that great. This might be my least favorite since like The Good Dinosaur.
Oof, really?
I mean, this just most of this did not work for me. You mentioned the humor, like we talked about on our Pixar bracket episode, where I mentioned how the movies just aren't as clever and witty and funny to me as much anymore. And this definitely falls in that category. I thought a lot of the humor felt forced and really flat, and they relied on kind of the same jokes over and over again. There's sort of a running bit about how the water people cry all the time, which is barely even a joke. It's just kind of like they're made of water, so let's just say that makes them cry, which also makes them sad all the time, which doesn't really
and
fit.
the fire people get angry easily is kind of
right, but
also insinuated.
Yeah, and there were just a lot of things, the world building felt very lacking to me. There's no real semblance of like any kind of community here other than just like nobody really likes the fire people. I mean, there's one wind character and one earth character, and they're barely anything, especially the earth character.
I would have liked a little more on the society, and just to maybe get like who's the mayor? Is the mayor a wind person? Then
and that's where I thought of something like Zootopia, where it establishes kind of the history of the movie and what the city is supposed to be and why the city is the way that it is, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then it gives us this interesting mystery, which also Elemental starts to maybe kind of do at the beginning. And then it just sort of like forgets about it. And so it also kind of switches what it's about like halfway through, which I found kind of irritating.
I wish it would have drilled down more on like maybe some like city corruption,
That's where I thought it was going. Like they set this thing up.
Once she befriends the wind lady, then you think, okay, wind lady can help her get to the next level. And then like when they find out that like, oh, whoever's at the top, like they don't care because of XYZ, and then you can get more out of that, and then through that we could see more of the world. So
it's just like bad,
almost forgotten.
It's just like bad infrastructure. Like there's no thing there. And I like visually, this reminded me a little bit of The Good Dinosaur in the sense that like kind of there are elements, no pun intended, of the city and like the world that they've built that look very realistic. And then you have characters that are not meant to look real. I mean, they're not people, but they do look cartoonish.
Yeah, but
and so there's a contrast.
Like the contrast there. Normal.
Right. There's a contrast there similar to The Good Dinosaur, where it's like almost photorealistic, like landscapes, and then these sort of like cartoon style, oddly shaped dinosaurs. Yeah. And I found that kind of annoying here. Like it just felt like something I've seen them do before. The fire people I thought were fascinating to look at and easily my favorite visual part of the movie.
Yeah, the way they like shimmer and like they nailed
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
and the water people move as well in kind of a similar way, and they do some creative things where like you can kind of see through them and the way that it like distorts what you like. That's done kind of interestingly, but they also just still kind of look plastic in a way. And the fire people I thought looked very interesting, and I don't know, I like that part quite a bit, but man, I just kind of felt like the story was thin, the world building was all concept. Like there are a lot of things that they bring up that have nothing to do with anything other than like we're in this world and here's how like these people use chairs. Like there's no, it's not connected to any character or part of the story really. It's just kind of like a little fun nugget for this world that they created and then had really no interest in exploring.
And why can nobody tell the boats to take a different route, or like the yachts that are causing this whole thing?
Right?
That's what I felt like. I kept waiting and thinking like, okay, now we're gonna meet like the CEO of the yacht company who knows that this is happening and is paying the city to ignore it. You know, like
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Like we were gonna get like maybe like a little PG Chinatown element of this, but it just abandons that like halfway through the movie for this stronger focus on an immigrant story, which, like I said, I did find effective, but that's kind of it, unfortunately.
And I guess I might have gotten, I don't know how the crowd was when you saw it, but my crowd, and not naming anyone in particular, but must have had a lot of water people because there were multiple tears. This was a 3-cry movie for someone I know. And it felt like other people in the audience, like there was a family next to me and the mom happened to be pretty much like a seat away from me. And there was a moment down the stretch and like I heard her audibly go like, "Oh my God." Like I heard her like audibly gasp, like, "Oh my," like, so I felt like the emotional moments, I mean, I didn't feel them quite on that level, but like they were working for some people clearly. Like,
I mean,
feel it. And I guess maybe I might have, that
it has a good audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like in the 90s or something, I think, from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. So people seem to be liking it, but nobody's seeing it. It was like their second worst opening weekend ever. They've made like $40 million, which sounds like a lot, but this movie cost $200 million to make.
And why didn't they promote it more? It felt very weird that like now seeing it and knowing what the story was, why were they so like secretive and so like, I don't know. It just felt like they didn't give it the build up and the focus that I feel like most of their movies have, like
I have a hard time accurately gauging how movies are promoted now, just because like I don't watch anything that has commercials. I personally don't do like any social media, so I don't see anything there. I mean, I've been seeing trailers for it before other movies for a long time, but yeah, like to your point, there must have been some kind of disconnect because I feel like there's like people just usually know when a Pixar movie is coming into theaters, and it kind of felt like nobody around me was asking if I was going to go see the new Pixar movie. Like I was kind of the one telling people, like breaking the news that it was even that it exists.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, very very interesting. And then also just while we're talking about it, and then we'll get to the stars real quick. The opening short with Carl and the dog getting ready for the date did not do much for me.
That was what I was going to, the last thing I was going to bring up before we got to our stars. I thought that was horrendous.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people out there like loving this, and I just kind of feel like it's not good. It's lazily written, I felt like.
It's callbacks and like not really fresh jokes that like I chuckled a few times.
It's just lazy writing and humor, and it did absolutely nothing for me, and honestly like put me in kind of a bad mood. Like also, I gotta say, I think we've talked about this before. I saw this at an AMC, and the start time for the movie was 3 p.m.
Oh, I think I know where you're going for this.
The movie did not actually start until like 3:20 3:28, 3:30.
Mine
And
too.
part of that is there's like a 6-minute short.
I also
but
saw it at AMC. Same.
22 minutes of
Yes.
trailers.
Yes.
I mean, what are we
The
doing?
movie, I know the actual movie Elemental, I swear, did not. My showtime was at 6. It did not start until 6:40. Like that's what it felt like. Like
Yeah,
I was looking down at my clock because when me and Hannah sat down, there was a bunch of seats open to our left, and there was a family right to our right. So we're like, we'll give it time, and then like we'll move. And then we kept being like, we'll move in 5 minutes. We'll move in 5 minutes. And then when we finally did, I swear, like it was like 6:45 because like the movie was starting, and then a family did come in super late with like 5 kids, and I was like, oh man, it must be hard to wrangle those children. You're showing up 50 minutes late to a movie, but you barely missed anything.
I was thinking about that too, because I was like I was sitting next to like a 6-year-old kid.
Yeah,
she was like 2 seats away from me, and I was like, she's just been sitting here waiting for this movie to start for like half an hour.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm like, that could be part of it too. I mean, I was just like, with how many trailers there were and then how bad the short was, like by the time the movie started, I was just like ready to leave, basically. I will give this a second try once it goes on to Disney Plus, because I do wonder. I mean, I still doubt it's gonna rise that much, but I might find it slightly funnier or something like that. But man, I just thought that I just hate whenever I have to see a movie at an AMC.
Yeah, I could not believe it. I got to remember that next time, because I have a AMC gift card, but I got to remember, like, okay, showtime's at 6. I can get there at 6:20, and it's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Madness. All right, should we get to the stars?
Yeah, let's dive into the star ratings. We'll be right back. Okay, I'll go first. Okay. We'll get the bad out of the way, and then you can say nicer things about it. I'm like between a 2 and a 2.5. It's hard for me to go. There's nothing like offensive about it, but it's just so meh and so unfunny and so bland to me. Like the word that I just thought of when I left the theater was bleh. Like I just feel like I watched something entirely forgettable. The animation's really well done, and the fire people look interesting, but I'm kind of getting a little tired of, I don't know, Pixar. Like that's one thing I will give Turning Red, which I like significantly better than Elemental, but didn't love. It had a interesting aesthetic to it that Pixar had never really done before. Same thing with Luca. And there are parts of this, like the fire people have, in each one of their recent movies, there's been some part of the animation that's been a little bit different, but this one didn't have enough differences for me to just kind of, I don't know. It all looked very plastic and just not really a fan. So 2.5, I guess.
Okay. Because
I looked at some other things that I gave a 2.
Yeah.
Or that I gave a 2.5 to, and thought like, well, it's not worse than that. Okay. But that was really, 2.5 range, just really not a fan.
Well, yeah, over to me. I'm going to go a full star higher. I'm going to give this a 3.5. When I walked out of the theater, it might have just been my theater experience, but I was thinking, I was leaning towards a 4, and I thought like it just felt like I had that Pixar experience that I hadn't had in a while. Luca came out during the pandemic. So did Turning Red, and then the last one I think I saw in theaters was Onward, which isn't,
or Lightyear, which I totally forgot even existed.
I know, I didn't even see Lightyear. And it might have helped that it actually was kind of a romantic comedy, which not all Pixar's are, not all Pixar movies are that at all. And so for me, I walked out of there feeling good, but also still definitely not the greatness that Pixar had achieved in their title run. But I felt like it was better. Maybe that was just me, but the humor was working for me. Visually fun to look at. I thought the water people were fun to look at. They did a lot of clever things, constantly little clever things. They brought in some comedic, some good voice talent, which I felt like helped, like Catherine O'Hara as his mom, and just other things. I was laughing. I was having a good time. I'm gonna give it a 3.5 for Elemental.
All right.
Anything
else, or I think it's your turn to put a wrap on the show.
Yeah, I believe it is my turn, and I am ready right now. A wilderness explorer is a friend to all, be a plant or fish or tiny mole.